The dim glow of the habitat ring's emergency lights cast long shadows across the command deck of the Unity Accord. Captain Lyra Voss gripped the edge of her console, her scaled fingers tapping in erratic rhythm against the worn alloy. The Krellian female had always prided herself on her unflappable calm. Centuries of navigating asteroid fields and diplomatic minefields had honed it, but now, with the ship's human contingent vanished overnight, that calm frayed like old netting. "Status on the cryopods?" she asked, her voice a low hiss through the translator implant. She turned to her second, Engineer Thorn, a burly Grun whose furred bulk filled half the alcove. Thorn's eyes, wide and unblinking, reflected the flickering holographs of empty bunks. "All negative, Captain," he rumbled, his tusks clicking in frustration. The humans were their last cycle. Jensen cracking jokes about zero-G pranks, Maria monitoring the drive signatures. No. Nothing. No residue, no logs, no distress signals. It's like the void swallowed them whole. Lyra's tail lashed once, a sharp crack against the deck plating. The Unity Accord was a joint venture, the pinnacle of the Galactic Concord's cooperative era. Krellians for navigation, Grun for engineering, and humans for everything else. Their ingenuity had patched hull breaches with spit and salvage, negotiated treaties over shared rations, turned disasters into triumphs. Without them, the ship felt hollow, adrift in more ways than one. She pulled up the stellar map, stars blurring into streaks as the ship hurtled toward the outer rim. Their mission was simple: scout the uncharted nebula for habitable worlds, but the humans had made it possible. Jensen's jury-rigged sensors pierced cosmic dust where standard tech failed. Maria's quick thinking had averted a plasma storm just last week. Now, with the nebula looming on the view screen like a swirling bruise, Lyra felt the weight of command settle heavier. "Run a full sweep again," she ordered, though she knew it was futile. "And alert the council. If this is sabotage." Thorn shook his head, his massive paws flying over the diagnostics. "No breaches, no intruders. Bioscans show the air's clean but their quarters, empty. Clothes folded, tools in place. Like they stepped out for a walk in the stars." A soft chime interrupted from the comms panel. Ensign Kira, the young avian navigator perched on her stool, tilted her feathered head. Her voice was a melodic trill, edged with unease. "Incoming transmission from the Concord hub, Captain. Priority 1. It's about the other ships." Lyra's spines bristled. "Other ships?" She patched it through, the hologram shimmering to life. A stern-faced Vexery admiral, her multifaceted eyes gleaming. "Voss, report your human complement. All Concord vessels are experiencing the same anomaly. Billions across the Alliance, gone. No traces. The age of cooperation hangs by a thread." The words landed like a meteor strike. Lyra glanced at Thorn, who had frozen mid-keystroke, and Kira, whose wings fluttered in agitation. The nebula ahead pulsed with ethereal light, hiding secrets that suddenly seemed far more ominous. Without humans, what chance did they have against the unknown? Thorn broke the silence first, his voice a gravelly whisper. "Captain, if they're all disappeared, who's flying the freighters? Maintaining the relays? We can't hold the rim without them." Lyra straightened, forcing steel into her posture. "We adapt. Check the auxiliary drives, human backups might still be viable." But even as she spoke, doubt coiled in her gut. The human's grit had always been the glue. Now the Accord was coming apart at the seams. As the nebulous tendrils reached out on the view screen, enveloping the ship in a haze of ionized gas, Lyra wondered if this was the end of more than just their crew. The stars, once a canvas of shared ambition, now whispered of isolation. The dim glow of the console flickered across Alara's face as she hunched over the navigation panel, her fingers dancing across the haptic interface. The scout ship, Vanguard's Echo, hummed with the low thrum of its fusion drive, but the stars outside the viewport remained stubbornly fixed. No leap, no fold in space. Kale, her engineer partner, paced behind her, his tail twitching in agitation, the metallic implants on his arms glinting under the emergency lights. "Try the bypass again," Alara said, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. She was the cautious one, always double-checking trajectories before any jump, but this glitch felt like more than a faulty relay. The Galactic Concordance's network had been silent for cycles now, ever since the human enclaves went dark. No signals, no trade pings, just void. Kale grumbled, sliding into the access port beneath the console. His tools clattered as he pried open a panel, sparks flying like angry fireflies. Bypasses fried. Something's interfering, maybe residual warp echoes from that last human outpost we scanned. He was the bold type, quick with fixes and quicker with sarcasm, but even he couldn't mask the worry in his gravelly tone. The humans had vanished without a trace months ago, their stations cold, their fleets ghosts. The Concordance called it a migration, but Ilara knew better. It smelled of sabotage or worse. A sharp alarm pierced the cabin, red lights pulsing. The environmental seals were failing, microleaks in the hull venting precious oxygen into the black. Ilara's heart raced. They were light years from the nearest relay, and without the jump drive, drifting meant death by attrition. Kale, seal it manually. We can't afford to lose Atmo. He emerged, grease-streaked and cursing in his native dialect. Sealed, but it's patchwork. We've got hours, maybe less if the leak spread. He glanced at the scanner, its display cluttered with anomalous readings. And, look, energy signatures ahead. Not Concordance tech. Primitive, but organized. Ilara pulled up the feed. Blips dotted the void. A ragtag fleet cobbled from salvaged hulls, closing in like wolves on a lame herd. Pirates? Remnants of the Outer Rim syndicates? But these signatures hummed with an unfamiliar rhythm, almost improvisational, like jury-rigged engines pushing beyond design limits. She zoomed in on the lead ship, a battered freighter, its flanks scarred by what looked like asteroid impacts, yet it moved with purposeful grace. They're hailing us, Kale said, syncing his implant to the comms. Static crackled, then a voice broke through, rough and accented, not in any standard tongue but pieced together from trade pigeons. Unidentified vessel, this is the Reclaimer. Power down your drive and prepare for boarding. We don't want trouble, but we need your parts. Ilara exchanged a glance with Kale. Reclaimers, scavengers who'd proliferated since the human disappearance, stripping abandoned outposts for survival. But this group felt different. Their formation was too tight, too efficient for mere opportunists. We can't let them board, she whispered. They'll strip us bare, leave us for the vacuum. Kale nodded, already rerouting power to the point defense lasers. Options? Ram them? Bluff? She thought fast, her mind racing through protocols. The humans had left behind archives of their history, tales of ingenuity and desperation, turning scraps into weapons. Maybe that was the key. Divert auxiliary power to the cargo bay emitters. Simulate a hull breach explosion. Make them think we're venting plasma. As Kale worked, the Reclaimer loomed closer, its docking clamps extending like predatory claws. Ilara keyed the external speakers, forcing comm into her reply. Negative, Reclaimer. We're compromised, core breach imminent. Evacuate vector or risk contamination. The response came after a tense pause, laced with suspicion. Contamination? What kind? Show visuals. Ilara triggered the simulation. Holographic projectors in the bay flared, mimicking a cascading failure, plumes of illusory gas blooming against the stars. Kale hooped softly as the readings spiked on their own scanners, fooling even the basics. The Reclaimer veered off, its fleet scattering in a ripple of evasive maneuvers. But as they pulled away, Ilara caught a final transmission fragment, garbled but clear enough. Human mods, keep the signal alive. The words hung in the air like a promise or a threat. The leak stabilized for now, but the jump drive remained dead and the void stretched endlessly. Ilara leaned back, exhaustion etching lines on her face. Whatever the humans had left behind, it was pulling them deeper into the unraveling galaxy, one clever lie at a time. The dim glow of the habitat's emergency lights cast long shadows across the control room, turning the consoles into jagged silhouettes. Ilara gripped the edge of the navigation panel, her knuckles whitening as another tremor shook the station. The Kreller Drift, once a bustling hub for interstellar trade, now felt like a hollow shell, adrift in the void where humanity's fleets used to weave through like threads in a grand tapestry. Stabilizers are at 20%, Thorne muttered, his voice a low rumble over the hum of failing systems. He was the engineer, broad-shouldered and unyielding, with grease-streaked fur that spoke of hours spent wrestling with machines built for hands, not claws. His tail flicked irritably as he patched a conduit, sparks dancing at his paws. If we don't reroute power soon, this whole arm's going to shear off. Zenara paced behind him, her lithe form cutting through the air like a shadow. The diplomat's scales shimmered faintly under the lights, a remnant of her aquatic heritage, but her eyes, sharp and calculating, betrayed no fear, only frustration. Reroute from where? Life support's already rationed. The Vexery delegation won't last another cycle without it. She glanced at the viewport where the debris field loomed, a graveyard of human ships twisted into metallic husks. Elara didn't look up from her screen, her fingers, nimble despite the avian feathers that tipped them, flying across the interface. She was the pilot, cautious to a fault, always the one to double-check trajectories before a jump. The humans left protocols for this. Something about adaptive shielding. Her voice wavered slightly, the weight of the absence pressing in. No more human advisors barking orders, no more of their infuriating optimism pulling miracles from thin air. Thorn snorted, sealing the conduit with a hiss of plasma. Adaptive? Their tech's a relic now. All flair, no substance without them. But even as he said it, doubt crept into his tone. The station's core, a human design, had held against worse storms. He wiped his paws on his vest and leaned over Elara's shoulder. Show me the schematic again. The tremor hit harder this time, jolting them all. Alarms blared, red lights pulsing like a wounded heart. Zenara stumbled, catching herself on a bulkhead. That's the third in an hour. The field's destabilizing. Those wrecks are pulling us in. Elara pulled up the grid, holographic lines flickering to life. The debris formed a swirling vortex. Remnants of the last human convoy vanished without trace cycles ago. If we fire the thrusters wrong, we'll accelerate right into it. But ignoring it, she trailed off, tracing a path with her talon. A narrow corridor through the chaos, barely wide enough for the station's bulk. Thorn's eyes narrowed. We improvise. Bleed power from the docking bays, seal them off, use the reserves to boost the shields. It'll trap anyone outside, but there shouldn't be. He stopped, remembering the Vexery scouts who'd ventured out earlier, hunting for salvage. Zenara's scales bristled. They're out there now, gathering data on the field. If we cut the bays. Her voice hardened. We can't abandon them. Not after the humans showed us how. The room fell silent, save for the groan of straining metal. Elara met Thorn's gaze, then nodded once, resolute. Then we adapt their way. Manual override on the outer arrays. I'll fly us through the gap while you patch the shields. Thorn grinned, a flash of teeth in the gloom. Risky. But humans would have loved it. He dove back into the wiring, tools clattering. As Elara initiated the sequence, the station lurched forward, engines whining in protest. Through the viewport, the debris loomed larger, a colossal human freighter, split like a cracked egg, tumbling end over end. Zenara braced against the console, whispering a silent vow to the void. The age of cooperation might have ended with humanity's silence, but its echoes would guide them yet. The gap narrowed, hull scraping with a screech that vibrated through their bones. Sparks flew from the panels, and for a heartbeat, the stars blurred. Then, with a shuddering sigh, they cleared it, the field receding like a defeated beast. But as the alarms quieted, a new ping echoed, faint, insistent. A distress beacon from the sealed bay. The Vexery alive but now adrift in the cold. Thorn's paws stilled. We bought time. But the cost. Elara exhaled, feathers ruffling. The station stabilized, but the void felt emptier, humanity's ingenuity a double-edged blade in their grasp. Crix's claws clicked against the grated floor as he edged forward, the dim emergency lights casting long shadows that danced like specters along the corridor. The air hummed with the faint whine of failing life support, a reminder that the human vessel's systems were as enigmatic as its vanished crew. He adjusted the harness of his toolkit, feeling the weight of the scanner pressing into his exoskeleton. Lyra moved ahead, her furred tail flicking with impatience, while Zor trailed behind, his feathers ruffled from the recycled air's chill. These bulkheads are thicker than a Vorath hive wall, Lyra muttered, tracing a gloved paw over the seamless metal. Her voice echoed slightly, swallowed by the vast emptiness. She pressed the panel, and it hissed open with a reluctant groan, revealing a chamber cluttered with what looked like dormant consoles. Wires snaked across the floor like forgotten roots, and in the center stood a pedestal holding a crystalline data core, human tech, pristine amid the decay. Zor tilted his head, his beak clicking in thought. Elegant, isn't it? No ostentatious displays, just function wrapped in form. If only our councils built ships like this instead of debating beak-shape regulations. He hopped closer, avoiding a puddle of congealed lubricant that gleamed under the lights. But his levity faded as the scanner in Crix's grip beeped urgently, a power surge building in the walls. Crix froze, his mandibles parting in alarm. Back away. The auxiliary generators are cycling unevenly. One wrong step, and this section could vent to space. He waved his appendages frantically, urging them toward the doorway. Lyra hesitated, eyes locked on the core. It pulsed faintly, a heartbeat in the machine's corpse, promising answers to the disappearance that had unraveled alliances across the quadrant. The humans' grit, their unyielding push into the unknown, had bound species together once. Now their absence fueled suspicion and isolation. She reached out anyway, fingers brushing the crystal's edge. A spark jumped and the chamber shuddered. Lights flickered, plunging them into near darkness save for the core's glow. Alarms blared, sharp and insistent, as a grate overhead buckled, raining debris. Lyra dove aside, rolling into Zor, who squawked and flapped his wings for balance. Crix lunged, grabbing her arm and yanking her back just as a panel exploded in a shower of sparks. They scrambled into the corridor, the door sealing behind them with a finality that echoed their growing desperation. Panting, Lyra shook off Crix's grip. That was close. But we need that data. The cooperation pacts are fraying. Without proof of what took the humans, the summit will collapse. Zor preened a singed feather, his wit returning like a shield. Proof? We're one fried circuit from becoming ghosts ourselves. Crix, your plan to reroute the power grid, did it work, or are we improvising again? Crix consulted his scanner, its screen cracked but functional. Readings showed the surge stabilizing, but the core was locked now, its defenses awakened. It bought us time, but the ship's AI is fragmenting. Adaptive protocols, human style, learning from our intrusion. He traced a path on the holographic map, his cautious nature urging retreat, yet the team's camaraderie pulled him onward. They'd come too far, crossing rival territories and dodging patrols, all for this relic of a species that taught the galaxy to collaborate through sheer tenacity. Lyra nodded, wiping coolant from her fur. Then we adapt too. Zor, your diplomatic codes, can you interface with the auxiliary ports? Crix, rig a bypass. No more half measures. As they moved deeper, the ship groaned like a beast stirring from slumber. A distant rumble suggested failing stabilizers, tilting the deck ever so slightly. The risk was mounting. One breach and their shuttle would be the only way out, stranding them if the engines gave. But in the human shadow they pressed on, ingenuity their only weapon against the void. The dim glow of the habitat's emergency lights flickered across the chamber, casting long shadows that danced like uneasy specters on the metallic walls. Lyra gripped the edge of the console, her four-fingered hands trembling slightly as she scanned the readouts for the third time. The air recyclers hummed faintly, but the oxygen levels were dipping lower than protocol allowed. Another hour, maybe two, before the crew would start feeling the burn in their lungs. Kale, the engineer, paced behind her, his broad shoulders hunched in frustration, while Terran leaned against the bulkhead, arms crossed, her sharp eyes flicking between them both. We reroute the auxiliary power again, Kale muttered, his voice a low rumble that echoed the vibration of the failing ship. He wasn't one for waiting. His kind, the Vorith, built things to last, but this relic from the old cooperative era was testing even his patience. The human-designed conduits can handle it. They always did. Lyra shot him a glance, her cautious nature urging restraint. As the mission's lead xenobiologist, she'd studied the archives obsessively since humanity's vanishing. Decades ago, they'd forged alliances that spanned stars, their ingenuity the glue holding fractious species together. Now, on this forsaken outpost orbiting Epsilon Drift, that legacy was all they had. And risk a cascade failure? We've already lost the primary drive. One wrong surge and we're adrift for good. Terran pushed off the wall, her lithe form moving with the easy grace of a Zeth scout. Would always cut through tension for her, a tool sharper than any blade. Oh, come on, Lyra. If the humans could jury-rig a warp core with chewing gum and optimism, we can manage a breather without turning the ship into a balloon. She smirked, but her tail twitched, a telltale sign the joke masked real worry. The resource shortage had hit hard. Their probe to the surface had malfunctioned, stranding them without the dilithium crystals needed to jump home. Without them, the cooperation they'd pieced together from human blueprints would unravel, leaving them as ghosts in the void. Kale stopped pacing and slammed a fist into his palm, the sound like a muffled thunderclap. Fine. We suit up and go manual. Terran, you're with me, we'll breach the lower decks, tap the reserves directly. His eyes, a piercing blue, locked on Lyra. You monitor from here. Keep the level steady. Lyra nodded, though doubt gnawed at her. The lower decks were a labyrinth of corroded human tech, riddled with microfractures from the outpost's decay. But argument would waste precious air. As Kale and Terran donned their suits, the seals hissing shut, she watched the viewport. The swirling storms of Epsilon drift below, a toxic haze that had claimed countless expeditions before theirs. Humanity's disappearance hadn't just ended the age of easy alliances. It had left puzzles like this one, demanding grit where once there'd been effortless aid. The airlocks cycled with a groan, and they were gone, vanishing into the access shaft. Lyra turned back to the console, her fingers flying over the controls. Alarms beeped softly, a pressure drop in Section 4. She adjusted the flow, buying minutes, but the readouts painted a grim picture. The plan was solid on paper. Siphon the emergency tanks, redistribute. Yet as the minutes stretched, a new warning flashed, hull integrity compromised. Something had gone wrong down there, faster than anticipated. She keyed the comm. Kale? Status. Static crackled, then Terran's voice, edged with strain. Conduits are fused, human failsafes kicking in, locking us out. We're cutting through, but it's venting atmosphere. Fast. Lyra's hearts raced, two chambers pounding in unison. The backup plan backfired spectacularly. The very ingenuity they'd relied on was now a barrier, designed to prevent exactly this kind of desperation. She glanced at the oxygen gauge, critical now. Outside, the storm clouds parted briefly, revealing the barren rock below, indifferent to their struggle. If they didn't adapt, the cost would be their lives, a quiet end to what was meant to revive the old cooperative spirit. In the dim underbelly, Kale wedged his tool against a stubborn panel, sparks flying as Terran held the light steady. Almost, he grunted, sweat beading on his scaled brow despite the suit's chill. But the hiss grew louder, a serpent uncoiling, and Lyra's voice cut through the comm again. Evacuate now, I'm sealing the bulkheads. No choice. They retreated, the shaft closing behind them with a finality that echoed their fading hopes. Back in the habitat, suits shed in haste, the three gathered around the flickering holomap. Oxygen at 18%. The crystals on the surface tantalizingly close but unreachable in the storm. Lyra's mind raced. Humanity's grit wasn't just in the machines. It was in the choices, the refusal to yield. We go down together, Terran said, her wits subdued but eyes alight. Surface run. Manual retrieval. It's risky but... Kale nodded, a rare grin cracking his face. Like the old stories. Humans didn't quit. Lyra hesitated, then straightened. The challenge loomed, real and raw. No empires, no heroes, just them against the void. But in that moment, the spark of cooperation reignited, fragile yet fierce. They prepped the shuttle, the engine whining to life as the outpost's lights dimmed one by one. The storm awaited, but so did their chance. The dim glow of the emergency lights flickered across the control room, casting long shadows that danced like uneasy specters on the bulkheads. Captain Lyra Voss gripped the edge of the console, her chitinous fingers clicking against the metal as she scanned the readouts for the third time. The Krell ship's engines had sputtered to a halt 2 cycles ago, stranded in the void between the outer colonies, and now the oxygen recyclers were failing. Her crew, Engineer Torque, the burly Grath with his perpetual scowl, and Navigator Ellen, the sleek Vexery whose eyes darted like quicksilver, huddled nearby, their breaths shallow in the thinning air. We reroute power from the shields again, it leaves us blind to any incoming debris, Torque rumbled, his voice a low vibration through the deck plates. He wiped a bead of sweat from his ridged brow, the strain etching deeper lines into his face. Lyra knew he was right. The asteroid field they'd skirted earlier loomed in her mind, a graveyard of shattered rock waiting for the slightest nudge. Ellen's tendrils twitched, interfacing directly with the NAV console. No other options. The core's depleted. If we don't act, we'll suffocate before rescue even pings us. Her words were clipped, efficient, but Lyra caught the undercurrent of fear. The Vexari prided themselves on precision, and this mess was anything but. Lyra straightened, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the red alerts. She'd commanded this vessel for 5 cycles, ever since the humans vanished, pulling the plug on the fragile alliances that had held the coalition together. No more of their endless optimism, their madcap fixes that turned disasters into triumphs. Just cold calculus now, and it was failing them. "Do it," she said finally, her voice steady despite the knot in her thorax. "Shields down. Recyclers first." Torque lumbered to the auxiliary panel, his massive hands surprisingly deft as he bypassed the safeties. Sparks flew, brief and brilliant, illuminating the worry lines on his face. The hum of the recyclers kicked in, a ragged whine that promised a few more hours of breathable air. But as the power shifted, the main view screen flickered to life unbidden, pulling in faint signals from the debris field ahead. Ellen leaned forward, her tendrils probing the data stream. Anomalous readings. Not natural rock, structured alloy, human-era signatures. The words hung in the air, heavy as the silence that followed. Humans. Gone for a decade, their stations cold, their fleets silent. Yet here, in the junk of forgotten space, a whisper of them. Lyra's pulse quickened, a rare thrill cutting through the dread. Enhance. Overlay schematics. The screen resolved into a jagged silhouette, a derelict probe half buried in an asteroid's crust, its hull pitted but intact. Markings etched in faded English, Explorer Class UN Origin, stared back at them like a ghost's accusation. Torque grunted, crossing his arms. Salvage it? For what? We're not scavengers. For survival, Lyra shot back, turning to face him. Her mandibles clicked in emphasis. Human tech was built to last. If there's a power cell or fusion tap intact, it could jumpstart our core. She didn't mention the deeper pull, the nagging void left by their disappearance. The coalition had fractured without human grit, the endless bickering, the failed joint ops. This could be a thread to pull, a way to prove they didn't need them. Or maybe, just maybe, a clue to where they'd gone. Ellen's eyes narrowed, calculating trajectories. It's risky. The field shifts with solar winds. One wrong vector and we're debris too. Lyra met her gaze, then Torque's. No speeches, no grand declarations. Just the weight of command in the thinning air. We adapt or we die. Suit up. We're going out. The airlock cycled with a hiss, expelling them into the star-speckled black. Lyra's suit lights cut through the void, illuminating the probe's weathered form as they jetted closer. Torque maneuvered the tether, his bulk steady against the pull of microgravity, while Ellen scouted the perimeter, her scanner beeping softly in the comms. Up close, the probe was a relic of ingenuity, solar sails crumpled but reparable, a compact drive core humming faintly on residual power. Lyra's gloved hand traced the access panel, her heart thudding as it yielded with a reluctant groan. Inside, circuits gleamed, untouched by time. Jackpot, Torque muttered, plugging in the transfer line. Energy flowed, a trickle at first, then, a surge that lit their visors like dawn. But as the download initiated, the probe's log activated, a burst of audio, garbled but unmistakable. Human voices, urgent, overlapping. Containment breach, the signal, they're coming back. Static swallowed the rest. Lyra froze, the words echoing in her helmet. Coming back? From where? The asteroid groaned then, a subtle shift in the field, and Ellen's voice crackled over comms. Captain, debris incoming. We have to move. They retracted the tether in a frenzy, the probe's gift pulsing through their lines. Back aboard, seals hissing shut behind them, Lyra watched the view screen as rocks tumbled past, inches from hull breach. The core stabilized, light steadying to blue. Torque slumped into his seat, exhaling. That was too close. And what the void was that log? Ellen disconnected her tendrils, her face pale. A warning. Or a trap. Either way, it's changed everything. Lyra, the dim glow of the auxiliary lights flickered across the control deck, casting long shadows that danced like uneasy spirits. Ilara gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles whitening as the ship's hull groaned under another wave of debris impacts. The Vexery scout vessel, once a sleek predator of the void, now limped through the asteroid field like a wounded beast. Beside her, Kor, the burly Trellian engineer, muttered curses in his native tongue, his forearms a blur as he rerouted power from non-essential systems. "We can't keep this up," Ilara said, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. She was the only human left in this ragtag alliance, a xenobiologist who'd survived the purge by sheer luck, or stubbornness as Kor often joked. Her dark hair was matted with sweat, and the environmental suit clung to her like a second skin, but she refused to show the fear gnawing at her edges. "The sensors are picking up more signatures ahead. If that's the Crag fleet, we're done." Kor paused, one of his manipulators extruding a thin probe into a sparking panel. Signatures could be echoes from the old human relays. Remember the archives? They built these fields as buffers, laced with automated defenses. His multifaceted eyes gleamed with a mix of hope and skepticism. The Trellian was cautious by nature, always weighing risks like a merchant balancing scales, but his loyalty to the cause, to uncovering why humanity vanished and shattered the fragile peace, kept him glued to her side. A sharp jolt rocked the deck, sending tools skittering across the floor. Ilara braced herself, activating the emergency thrusters with a swipe. The ship veered, narrowly avoiding a tumbling boulder the size of a shuttle. "Echoes or not, we need a way through. The data core we pulled from Zorth Station is our only lead. If we lose it..." She didn't finish. The core, a fist-sized artifact humming with encrypted human tech, sat secured in the adjacent lab. It held fragments of the final transmissions before the disappearance, hints of a betrayal or perhaps a sacrifice that ended the age of cooperation. The Crag Dominion, opportunistic scavengers, had been hunting them since they decrypted the first layer, their warships prowling these haunted fringes. Kor retracted his probe and slammed a fist against the panel. "Power surge incoming. I've got a bypass, but it'll fry the shields for 30 seconds. You call it human." Ilara's mind raced. Shields down in an asteroid storm meant certain death. Up and they'd drift too slow, easy prey for any pursuers. She glanced at the viewport where the field loomed, a chaotic ballet of rock and ice, remnants of a human-engineered barrier meant to protect trade routes. Ingenuity, they called it. Humans didn't conquer with brute force. They adapted, turned obstacles into allies. "Drop the shields," she decided, her tone clipped. "Route everything to forward momentum. And Kor, prep the grapples. If we hit an echo, we latch on." He nodded, his mandibles clicking in approval. "Bold. Reckless. Very you." The shields hummed down, the ship's skin suddenly vulnerable. Debris pinged off the hull like hail on thin metal, each impact a thunderclap in the confined space. Ilara pushed the engines to their limit, weaving through the narrowing gaps. A massive fragment loomed ahead, its surface pitted and scarred, too close, too fast. Kor's arms flew across his station. Grapples away. Lines shot out, magnetic clamps biting into the rock. The ship shuddered as it tethered, swinging wildly like a pendulum in the storm. Alarms blared, but Ilara held course, using the asteroid's mass as a slingshot. They hurtled forward, the field parting just enough. A narrow corridor revealed by the human relays activating in sequence, dormant beacons pulsing to life. But as they cleared the worst, a new blip lit the sensors. Not an echo but a Crag interceptor closing fast from the flank. Its weapons arrays glowed with charged plasma. "They're on us," Kor growled, sealing the lab bulkhead. "That Kor, they want it as bad as we do." Ilara's hands tightened on the controls. The gamble had bought them distance, but the cost was clear. The ship's integrity was cracking and the Crag wouldn't hesitate to board. She activated the distress beacon, a human protocol buried in the Corps' code, one that might summon unlikely aid or doom them all. In the void's silence, the only sound was the relentless drum of pursuit. The dim glow of the emergency beacons flickered across the cavern walls, casting long shadows that danced like specters in the thin atmosphere. Crix scuttled forward, his mandibles clicking softly in rhythm with his unease. The air recyclers hummed faintly, but the oxygen levels were dropping faster than their makeshift patches could handle. A breach from the asteroid's unstable core had widened during the last tremor. Zara crouched beside the cracked console, her fur matted with dust, wiping sweat from her brow as she rerouted power lines with bare claws. "This isn't holding," she muttered, her voice steady but edged with frustration. "We patched the outer hull, but the inner vents are collapsing. If we don't seal this level soon, the whole habitat goes." Beside them, the salvage data core pulsed with faint light, its holographic display sputtering fragments of old human archives. Blueprints for atmospheric stabilizers, forgotten tech from an era when species shared the stars without suspicion. Tovik, the burly reptilian engineer from the fringe worlds, gripped his toolkit tighter, his scales rippling with barely contained agitation. He had been the one to insist on diving into this forsaken mining outpost, convinced the human relics held the key to bridging the growing rifts between the coalitions. Now, with the structure groaning under another seismic wave, his optimism felt like a liability. "The schematics show a secondary conduit here," he said, pointing a clawed finger at the flickering hollow. "If we can reach it, reroute the flow manually. But it'll mean crossing the fracture line." Crix hesitated, his compound eyes reflecting the chaos. He was the voice of caution in their trio, the one who had brokered fragile truces back on the council stations before the disappearances shattered everything. Humanity's vanishing had unraveled the threads of alliance. Without their mediators, old grudges festered into skirmishes over dwindling resources. This outpost, buried in the belt's edge, was supposed to be a neutral ground, a testament to what could be rebuilt. But the asteroid's core instability, triggered by recent solar flares, turned it into a trap. One wrong move, and they'd be just another cautionary tale. "The risk is too high," Crix buzzed, his voice a low vibration. "We've already lost the forward scouts. If the fracture widens," Zara shot him a glance, her ears flattening. "And if we sit here we suffocate. Tovik's right, we adapt or we die." She slammed the console panel shut, sparks flying as the system protested. The plan had seemed solid at dawn cycle. Infiltrate the core chamber, extract the stabilizer tech, and signal the waiting fleet. But the first tremor had buckled the access tunnel, forcing them to improvise with scavenged plating. Now their air reserves ticked down to hours, and the comms were jammed by mineral interference. Zara stood, slinging her pack over her shoulder. "I'm going. Cover me." Tovik nodded, hefting a fusion welder that doubled as a makeshift brace. "I'll anchor the line. Crix, monitor the feeds, warn us if it shifts." Reluctantly, Crix activated the sensor array, his limbs trembling as he fed the readings to their visors. The fracture line yawned like a wound in the rock, steam hissing from pressurized gases below. Zara clipped the tether to her harness and edged forward, her steps deliberate on the uneven footing. The ground shuddered again, a low rumble that vibrated through their bones, and a chunk of ceiling crumbled, narrowly missing Tovik's tail. Halfway across, Zara reached the conduit access, a rusted hatch etched with faded human script. She pried it open with a grunt, the metal screeching in protest. Inside, cables snaked like veins, but the flow was erratic, sparks arcing wildly. "Got visual," she reported, her voice tight. "It's damaged, but I can splice it. Give me 30 seconds." Tovik fed more slack on the line, his eyes locked on the widening crack beneath her. Crix's feeds showed the pressure building. The core was destabilizing faster than predicted. "Zara, pull back," he urged. "The readings, it's going to blow." She ignored him, fingers flying over the wires. A sharp crack echoed, and the fracture split further, swallowing the edge of the platform. Zara lunged for the splice, but the jolt threw her off balance. The tethers snapped taut as she dangled, tools scattering into the abyss. Tovik braced against a pillar, hauling with all his strength, scales straining. "Hold on." Crix scrambled to reinforce the winch, his mind racing through contingencies. The hollow archives flickered one last image. A human crew, smiling in unity, their ingenuity the glue that once held empires together. With a final heave, they pulled her up, Zara gasping as she collapsed beside them. The conduit hummed to life, stabilizing the air flow just as another tremor hit, but it was too late for the chamber. Alarms wailed as secondary breaches opened, forcing them to retreat toward the emergency pods. The data core was secured, at least its secrets intact. But as they sealed the hatch behind them, Zara wiped blood from a gash on her arm, her eyes meeting Crix's. We got what we came for. But the fleet, they'll have to wait. This rock's done. Tovik slumped against the bulkhead, the weight of their narrow escape settling in. In the silence, the outpost's lights dimmed, a reminder that some costs lingered, even in survival. The dim glow of the archive chamber flickered as Alara keyed in the next sequence, her claws tapping rhythmically against the console. The air hummed with the low vibration of ancient servers, pulling data from the human epic like threads from a frayed tapestry. Beside her, Crix hunched over his own terminal, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the scrolling lines of code, human code, stubborn and inefficient, yet laced with that inexplicable spark. "We've got a hit," Crix said, his voice a gravelly buzz that cut through the hum. "This fragment, it's from their final council. Not the politicians, the real ones. The engineers who built the Ark ships." Alara leaned closer, her breath fogging the screen momentarily. The projection bloomed, a grainy hollow of a human woman mid-40s by their standards, her face etched with lines of exhaustion and resolve. She spoke in that clipped, urgent tone all their recordings shared, gesturing at a model of swirling star systems. "Cooperation isn't a luxury anymore. It's the only vector. We've seeded the outpost, shared the tech with the Vexery and the Lyrans, but if we vanish they have to carry it forward. No empires, no hoarding. The protocols are embedded, triggered by our absence. They'll activate the beacons only if they choose unity." The recording stuttered, then looped back to static. Alara paused it, her tail flicking in agitation. "They planned for this? For their own erasure?" Crix nodded, his mandibles clicking thoughtfully. "Not suicide. Evacuation. But why hide the coordinates? We've combed every relay from here to the Veil." The chamber's outer door hissed open, admitting Thorn, their Zorathian liaison, his iridescent scales shifting from cautious blue to alert amber. He carried a data slate clutched in one claw, his steps measured but swift. "Intercepted a shadow transmission. The dissemblers, they're moving on the nexus point. If they corrupt the human legacy core before we decrypt it, the age of cooperation dies with it." Alara's spines bristled. The dissemblers, that splinter faction of isolationists, had been nipping at their heels since the expedition began. They preached self-reliance, scorning the human model's emphasis on shared vulnerability. If they reached the core first, they'd twist it into a weapon, fracturing the fragile alliances that had held since humanity's vanishing. "We can't let them," Crix growled, already pulling up navigational charts. His fingers danced across the controls, plotting an intercept vector that shaved precious hours off the journey. But the ship groaned in protest as he overrode the safeties. Fuel reserves were thinning, and the nebula ahead promised ion storms that could fry their shields. Thorn hesitated at the threshold, his gaze flicking between them. "This risks everything." The council ordered caution. "If we fail, then we fail like they did," Alara snapped, standing to face him. Her voice carried the weight of the archives they'd unearthed. Humans who had stared down cosmic extinction and chosen to bet on others. Hiding won't bring them back. "We go." Crix sealed the coordinates, the console beeping affirmation. As the ship lurched into motion, engines thrumming with borrowed power, Alara caught her reflection in the viewport, a silhouette against the starfield, no longer just a scholar, but part of the gamble. The nebula loomed, a churning wall of purple fire, and she wondered if the humans had felt this same pull, this defiant camaraderie in their last moments. Hours blurred into a tense vigil. Alarms blared as the first ion bursts battered the hull, sparks dancing across the bulkheads. Crix wrestled with the stabilizers, sweat beading on his exoskeleton, while Thorn manned the weapons array, scanning for dissembler signatures. Alara monitored the core's signal, faint but pulsing like a heartbeat. "There." Thorn barked, pointing to a blip on the tactical overlay. A sleek dissembler corvette, darting through the storm like a predator in fog. It was closer to the nexus, too close. Crix banked hard, the ship shuddering as it evaded a plasma tendril. "We can't outrun them. Have to flank." Alara's mind raced, sifting through human tactics from the archives, guerrilla maneuvers born of outnumbered fleets. Divert power to the auxiliary thrusters. Mimic their signature, draw them off. Thorn's scales flared in surprise, but he complied, rerouting energy with a series of urgent commands. The ship shuddered again, cloaked in false echoes, splitting the dissembler's attention. For a heartbeat it worked. The corvette veered, firing blindly into the storm. But then a direct hit rocked them, consoles exploding in showers of light. Crix slumped over his station, smoke curling from a gash in his side. Ilara dragged him back, applying a field patch with shaking hands, while Thorn returned fire, his shots grazing the enemy hull. "Cores in range," Ilara gasped, overriding the lockdown. The Nexus beacon flickered to life on their screens, a cascade of human directives, unfolding like a long-withheld promise. Cooperation protocols, trade pacts, survival schemas, all key to activate only in Unity. The dissembler's ship twisted away, damaged but not destroyed, vanishing into the nebula's depths. As their own vessel limped toward stability, Ilara helped Crix to his feet, the chamber filling with the soft chime of incoming data. The cost was etched in the scars on their ship, the ache in their limbs, but the signal strengthened, a bridge rebuilt from ghosts. Yet as the first protocols downloaded, a new alert pinged, an encrypted human log buried deeper. Coordinates, not to their lost homeworld. Ilara gripped the console's edge, her knuckles whitening against the dim glow of the readouts. The ship's hum had turned erratic, like a heartbeat skipping under strain. Beside her, Crix, the wiry Zenthari engineer with his ever-present toolkit slung over one shoulder, muttered calculations under his breath, his four-fingered hands dancing across auxiliary panels. "The core's destabilizing faster than we thought," he said, voice steady but edged with the caution that defined him. "If we don't vent the excess plasma soon, it'll breach the hull." Across the cramped bridge, Mira paced, her human boots thudding softly on the grated floor. Even after all these cycles since humanity's vanishing, she moved with that unyielding grit, her dark hair tied back in a practical knot. "We can't vent without losing propulsion," she countered, stopping to lean over Ilara's shoulder. The Trilix captain's scales shimmered faintly under the emergency lights, a reminder of the fragile alliance they'd forged in the ruins of the old coalitions. "That leaves us drifting right into the nebula's heart. One wrong pulse and we're ionized mist." Ilara nodded, her brave resolve flickering as she scanned the holographic display. Swirling clouds of gas loomed outside the viewport, a graveyard of forgotten human vessels entangled in the stellar debris. The challenge had started as a salvage run, scavenging pre-disappearance tech for the faltering interstellar trade, but now it was survival. A rival scavenger clan, the Vorith, had sabotaged their stabilizers, turning the nebula's magnetic storms into a deadly trap. The cost was already tallied, their scout drone lost and Crix's arms singed from an earlier overload. "Options?" Mira asked, her tone earnest, pulling them back from the brink of panic. She wasn't one for speeches, but her questions always cut to the core, demanding action over despair. Crix straightened, wiping lubricant from his brow ridge. "We repurposed the human artifact, the one we pulled from the derelict. Its shielding matrix could modulate the plasma flow, buy us time to reroute power." Ilara's eyes widened, the image of the ancient device flashing in her mind. A sleek, cylindrical module etched with faded Alliance insignia, humming with ingenuity long extinct. "Risky. It's untested against this scale of interference." Myra's jaw set, a spark of that human camaraderie igniting in her gaze. "Tested or not, it's what got us this far. Crix, you handle the mods. Ilara, plot an evasion vector, keep us out of the Voritha's crosshairs. I'll man the defenses." The plan snapped into motion, tension coiling like the nebula's winds. Crix dove into the engineering bay, tools clanging as he interfaced the artifact with the core. Sparks flew, illuminating his focused grimace. Ilara's fingers flew over the NAV controls, short bursts of thrust nudging the ship sideways, away from a looming plasma flare that lit the void in crimson streaks. Mira settled into the turret seat, her hands steady on the firing yoke, eyes locked on the sensor pings of approaching Vorith skiffs. A jolt rocked the vessel as the first enemy volley grazed their shields. Mira fired back, precise bursts scattering the pursuers. "They're closing, 2 minutes to intercept." In the bay, Crix's voice crackled over the comm, matrix integrating, "Hold on." The ship shuddered, engines whining as the human tech bridged the gap, stabilizing the flow just enough. But the adaptation wasn't seamless. A feedback loop surged, frying secondary circuits and plunging half the bridge into darkness. Ilara cursed softly, rerouting what power she could. The nebulous tendrils clawed closer, magnetic eddies tugging at their hull. Myra's shots kept the Vorath at bay, but one skiff broke through, ramming their flank. Alarms blared, hull integrity dropping. "Got it?" Crix shouted, the core's hum evening out. Propulsion surged back, propelling them into a tight spiral that evaded the worst of the storm. Myra's final barrage crippled the lead Vorath ship, sending it tumbling into the gas clouds. They cleared the nebula's edge, stars re-emerging like hesitant allies. But the victory carried weight. The artifact's matrix had burned out, its irreplaceable human essence sacrificed. Ilara slumped in her chair, the bridge lit by faint console glows. Mira placed a hand on her shoulder, a silent anchor. Crix emerged, toolkit scarred but intact, his cautious nod speaking volumes. The age of cooperation might have ended with humanity's disappearance, but in that moment, amid the lingering sparks and the vast, unforgiving black, they forged a new thread, one of grit and adaptation, fragile yet unbroken. The dim glow of the auxiliary lights flickered across the control room, casting long shadows that danced like specters over the consoles. Ilara gripped the edge of her station, her knuckles white against the cold metal, as the ship's alarms wailed in a relentless chorus. The Krell vessel loomed larger on the viewscreen now, its jagged hull blotting out the stars, a predator closing in on wounded prey. Beside her, Thorn muttered curses under his breath, his fingers flying across the damaged panel, rerouting what little power remained to the shields. "We've got maybe 10 minutes before they board," he said, voice steady but edged with the grit of someone who'd stared down worse. Not that this wasn't bad, real bad. The betrayal from the Alliance Council still burned, their edict declaring humanity's remnants a threat to the fragile peace. Ilara's people, scattered across the galaxy after the disappearance, had been the glue holding disparate species together. Ingenious traders, relentless explorers, the humans had brokered deals where others saw only war. But now, with the last major colony ship vanished into some anomaly, the Krell saw opportunity in the void. She glanced at Miko, the young engineer from the Vexian delegation, huddled in the corner with a makeshift toolkit scavenged from the debris. His tentacles quivered, not from fear. Vexians didn't do fear, but from the strain of adapting human tools to their biotech interfaces. "The warp core's stabilizing," he clicked, his translator beeping softly. "But if we push it, the rift could tear us apart. Your kind, you built this ship to bend space, not break it." Ilara nodded, forcing a wry smile. "That's the human way, push until it works or until we improvise something better." She'd always been the cautious one among her crew, the diplomat who preferred words over weapons. But caution had gotten them this far, hiding in the nebula's edge after the Council's hunters flushed them out. Thorn, ever the bold pilot, had argued for a straight run at the border. She'd voted for stealth. Now, with the engines coughing smoke and the Krell's tractor beams probing like fingers, stealth was a memory. A sharp jolt rocked the ship, sending sparks flying from an overhead conduit. Thorn slammed a fist on the console. "They're locking on. Ilara, we need a play, now." She straightened, mind racing through the fragments of old human logs they'd pieced together from the colony archives. The disappearance hadn't just erased billions, it had unraveled the networks of trust humans had woven. Species like the Krell, opportunistic scavengers, thrived in the chaos, hoarding resources while the galaxy splintered. But humans had left behind more than ruins, ideas, blueprints for unity that no one else could replicate. One log entry stuck in her mind. A captain facing odds like these, turning a failing shield into a weapon by overloading it with plasma feedback. Thorn, divert auxiliary power to the deflector array. Reverse the polarity, like that old Earth maneuver from the archives. He shot her a look, half doubt, half admiration. "You're betting our lives on a ghost story? Better than waiting to be boarded." She turned to Miko. "Can you sync the Vexian dampeners to amplify it? Make it pulse, not just hold." The engineer hesitated, his eyes, compound and gleaming, flicking between them. Trust wasn't easy for Vexians. Their hives valued consensus over heroics. But he'd seen enough human grit in the last cycle to know arguing wasted time. "It will work. But the cost, the array will burn out. No more stealth runs after this." The ship shuddered again, the view screen filling with the Krell boarders' docking clamps glinting like teeth. Elara felt the weight of it, their small crew the last echo of human cooperation facing erasure. No grand speeches, just action the kind that defined her ancestors. Do it. Thorn's hands blurred over the controls, channeling the warp core's unstable hum into the deflectors. Miko's tentacles wove through the jury-rigged cables, his biotech nodes glowing as they bridged the gap. The alarms peaked, a deafening crescendo, and then, silence. The shields didn't hold, they erupted. A brilliant arc of plasma lanced out from the Alliance ship's bow, not a steady beam but a wild, twisting lash that struck the Krell vessel amidships. The enemy hull buckled, shields flaring violet before shattering in a cascade of debris. Alarms blared on their side now, the deflector array melting under the overload, but the Krell ship listed, engines venting fire into the void. They're breaking off. Thorn hooped, though his face was pale, sweat beading on his brow. The view screen showed the Predator limping away, pursuit abandoned as secondary explosions ripped through its frame. Elara exhaled, slumping against her console. Victory but Pyrrhic. The ship's stealth capabilities were gone, a beacon now for every hunter in the sector. Miko retracted his tentacles, a soft whir of exhaustion. Your ingenuity, it saves us. But the Council will know. The age of cooperation dies harder than we thought. She met his gaze, the weight of tomorrow settling in. Humans were gone, but their spark lingered, in adaptations like this, in alliances forged under fire. The galaxy might fracture, but not without a fight. As the ship limped toward the nebula's heart, Elara plotted their next move, not flight but a signal, a call to the scattered remnants. Cooperation's end wasn't written yet. Elara stared at the flickering console, her fingers hovering over the controls as the alien ship's hull groaned under the strain of re-entry. The planet below, Earth or what was left of it, swirled with storm clouds that looked like bruises on bruised skin. Beside her, Crix, the wiry Zorith engineer, muttered calculations in his native tongue, his tentacles twitching with uncharacteristic nervousness. The atmospheric density is off by 17%, he said, switching to the pidgin they all used. If we don't adjust thrust now, we'll shear apart like wet paper. She nodded, not trusting her voice. The mission had been a gamble from the start. A coalition of species, piecing together fragments of human tech from derelict stations, all to rediscover the cradle world that had vanished into myth cycles ago. Humanity's disappearance had shattered the fragile alliances of the stars. Without their unpredictable ingenuity, the Great Migration stalled, wars reignited over scraps of knowledge. But now, with the ship bucking like a wild thing, Elara wondered if they just traded one extinction for another. Thrust vectoring manual override, she commanded, her human heritage, traced from a forgotten colony, lending her the steady hands her crew lacked. The Zorith relied on algorithms, the Valari scout, Mira, on intuition. But Elara? She remembered the old stories, whispered in cryosleep pods, humans who bent probability with sheer will. She slammed the levers forward, feeling the deck shudder as auxiliary boosters fired in a desperate cascade. Alarms wailed, red lights painting their faces in blood hues. Mira, strapped into the co-pilot's nest, her iridescent scales dimming with fear, reached out a clawed hand. Elara, the forward shields are at 23%. We hit that debris field again. Focus on the NAV, Elara snapped, though her own pulse thundered in her ears. The debris wasn't natural. Scans showed it was the bones of old orbital stations, twisted relics of humanity's heyday. They'd grazed it on descent, losing a sensor array and half their fuel. The plan had been elegant. Orbital insertion, then a pinpoint landing to search for archives. But the storms had other ideas, whipping winds that clawed at their fragile vessel like vengeful spirits. Crix's console spat sparks, and he yelped, slapping a patch over it with one tentacle while rerouting power with another. Power surge incoming. Rerouting to engines, hold on. The ship pitched violently, gravity fluctuating as inertial dampeners failed. Elara's stomach lurched. For a heartbeat she floated, weightless, staring at the viewport where continents blurred through the chaos. Africa maybe, or what the maps called it. Green patches amid endless gray, regrowth or ruin. Myra's voice cut through the din, sharp and urgent. Pull up now. Her claws danced over the auxiliary controls, firing lateral thrusters in a burst that yanked the ship sideways. They skimmed the edge of a thunderhead, lightning forking so close it lit the cabin like daylight. Elara tasted ozone, felt the heat through the reinforced glass. The external challenge wasn't just the weather, it was the planet itself, awakened and hostile after millennia of neglect. Scans from orbit had shown toxic blooms in the oceans, electromagnetic anomalies that scrambled signals. Landing here meant facing whatever had driven humanity away, or worse, what had taken them. The ship leveled out, but not before a buffet of wind sheared off a winglet. Alarms quieted to a dull beep, and Elara exhaled, wiping sweat from her brow. Status. Crix uncoiled, his color shifting to a relieved blue. Structural integrity at 67%. We can make the plateau, flat ground, minimal wind shear. Mira leaned back, her eyes, compound and gleaming, fixed on the approaching landmass. But the archives, if they're buried under that? We dig, Elara said simply, her voice steady now. It was the human way, or so the legends claimed. Adapt, endure, innovate from scraps. The coalition had formed in humanity's shadow, but today they'd carry the torch. As the ship touched down with a jolt that rattled teeth, dust billowing around them like a welcoming shroud, Elara unstrapped first. Outside, the air was thick, metallic, alive with the hum of something ancient. They stepped onto the soil, boots sinking into loamy earth that hadn't felt weight in ages. In the distance, ruined spires pierced the clouds, New York perhaps, or a ghost of it. Crix scanned with his portable unit, tentacles probing the air. Radiation nominal. But there's a signal, faint, repeating. Elara's heart skipped. A signal? From whom? The disappearance had been total, no transmissions, no colonies answering hails. Yet here it was, a pulse like a heartbeat from the ruins. Mira crouched, sifting dirt through her fingers. Look, microcircuitry in the soil. Self-repairing. Human tech, evolved wild. They moved toward the source, the wind dying to a whisper as if the planet held its breath. The consequence of their arrival lingered in every step. If humanity had fled or fallen, what welcome awaited? But as the signal strengthened, resolving into fragmented code, warnings, blueprints, pleas, Elara felt a spark. Not just survival, but revival. The age of cooperation hadn't ended. It had waited, buried, for grit like theirs to unearth it. In the shadow of a toppled monolith, they found the vault door, half submerged but humming with power. Elara placed her palm on the scanner, half expecting rejection. Instead, it whirred to life: lights,